Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our In the Inbox series. We're answering question number 121 today, which was asked to us by Dee. And Dee is preparing to close on property here in Belize. She's buying a lovely parcel of land. And she was asking us, are there any hidden or unexpected fees I should be aware of when buying a property in Belize? Are there any hidden or unexpected fees I should be aware of when buying a property in Belize? So what we did is we broke down the fees that you should already be expecting, especially if you've been tuning into our Luna Realty Belize channel. We've gone through some of these fees, but there are others, four others that I'm going to share with you that may not necessarily have been conveyed super clearly. So let's go through those. These are four to be expected. Number one are the closing costs. So you should anticipate to be paying an additional about 10% in closing costs on top of the purchase price for your closing fees. About 8% of that is going to be the stamp tax. That's a government tax. And then the other 2%, about 2%, is going to be the fees that are due to the closing company or the attorney. And packaged within that, about 2%, they include the central bank approval, the title check. They also include any of those other fees. Now, I do have a breakdown of what those other fees would be, those legal fees, and I can put a link in that in the description below so that you can check out that separate channel or that separate video if you want to see more specifically about that closing fees. The next is going to be a survey. So if you are preparing your offer to purchase and you have the survey contingency in there, this is pretty common for somebody who's purchasing land. If you're purchasing land, you want to know the clear boundary lines of your property. You're going to be paying for a survey. That's one of the contingencies that you'll have in the offer to purchase. And typically surveys can range from $500 US to about $3,000 US. This is going to be definitely dependent on where your property is located and how big of a property you are going to be surveying, and also the accessibility of this property. Is it a property that can only be accessed by boat? Is it raw jungle, or is it an open piece and secret beach? If it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get to, if it's going to be raw jungle, if it's larger in size, then expect it to cost more. Also, if you are buying property that already exists, a home, a condo, whatnot, and you want to get an inspection done on the property, this is also one of the contingencies that you typically have. If you're buying a finished property, you're going to get an inspection done, and these can cost anywhere from $300 to $1,000 US. And these fees, guys, can vary just depending on many things, the size, location, all of that, but these are just the general numbers. And then, of course, the company creation fees. So if you're going to be titling your property in your own company, whether it's a local Belize company or it's an international business company that you're setting up, then of course you're going to have those creation fees, and then of course the annual fees in order to keep up the company. Now, I'm going to share with you four unexpected costs, or maybe ones that are not as clear as those four. So often forgotten are going to be the prorations. So for example, HOA, electricity, water, and property tax. So depending on when you're buying the property, the closing company is going to prepare the closing statement, and these fees are going to be prorated. So property tax, for example, that's due the 1st of April every single year. So if you're buying May 1st, then expect for the proration to be for 11 months, since ideally and hopefully the seller has already paid for the year ahead, which is how they do the property taxes here. So expect those prorations. In addition to that, company upkeep fees. If you are buying a property that is being seller financed and that property is held in a company, in order for the seller to offer seller financing for you, they need to keep that company open because that is the name that the property is titled in. So they are likely going to expect for you to be paying for the company upkeep fees. If it's a local Belize company, expected to be about $500 US a year, but that number depends on who the registered agent is. So you always want to double check that. Again, this is if you're buying a property that's being seller financed and is held in a company, then the company upkeep fees are likely your responsibility to pay for. All right, often forgotten number three are going to be wire fees. So wire fees can cost you about 20 to 30 US dollars per transaction, depending on your bank. When you're sending money to the escrow company, do anticipate that they're going to ask you to put about another 25 to $30 on for the wire fee. And then, of course, whatever wire fee your bank charges you. And one final one here, last but not least, are going to be the reassessment fees. So during the titling process, titling for your physical piece of property takes about 18 months to get that physical piece of property. Now, if during that titling process, there are about 14 steps in there. So if you're buying your property for a really undervalued, way below market price, there is one step in there, which is the reassessment fee. So essentially, there's somebody from the lands department that assesses the property, assesses the value, sees how much you paid for it. And if they think that you paid too little for it, they're going to assess the stamp tax based on their assessed value. This does not happen all of that often, I promise you that, but it's typically more so to control, let's say, family members who are selling property to each other, or friends who are selling property to each other for $1, right? They have 10 acres here in Ambergris Caye. They're selling it off to their friend for $1, and they are going to obviously get reassessed because we know that there's not 10 acres worth $1 here on Ambergris Caye. So their land valuation folks will come in, assess what it should be, and then they'll base the stamp tax at 8% on what they assess it to be. This really does not happen often. It's just if you're buying something for so undervalued and under market price, that it raises the red flags where they get a little suspicious. And then, all right, that's the wrap up there. But if you're visiting us in person, let me just actually recap those. So often forgotten are going to be the prorations, the company upkeep fees, the wire fees, and the reassessment fees. And with that being said, if you're planning on visiting us in person, let us know, reach out to us. Our team would love to show you real estate if that is something you're interested in, but also request our friend and family guide. In here, we have a handful of personal recommendations of what we request you to be doing when you're here to check out some insider tips and whatnot. And then, of course, if you haven't already, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the Luna Realty Belize channel. We have a ton more of information that is going to be really helpful to you as you're buying here in Belize. Once again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you here in person. Bye, everyone.